some more people will be coming in, but never mind. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. We're very happy to see so many of you here. My name is Mino Hemati, and I will be facilitating our first webinar, 45 Minutes for Gender. MSP Institute is hosting this session. We are a small charitable association based in Berlin, Germany, dedicated to supporting high-quality dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders, stakeholder participation, and good governance. We've been working on gender and chemicals since 2017 with support from the German Federal Environment Ministry and have been active in the SAICM process since then. Anna Holthaus, who's coordinating our gender and chemicals work, will be giving a presentation, and I'm a co-founder and associate of MSP Institute advising the project. If we click one slide further, this is actually our first in a series of webinars. We invite you to join us once a month for 45 minutes on gender equality and its interconnections to the world of chemicals. Every last Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central European Summertime, there will be opportunities to learn from experts, policymakers, and practitioners, and to discuss how we can create a gender-responsive future framework for the sound management of chemicals and waste. And you see the list of sessions here on the slide. Today's session is dedicated to introducing you to the complex and multidimensional interconnections between gender and chemicals, and then we will be diving into different sectors. In August, we have guests from labor and health. In September, we want to look at practical projects on the ground. In October, at green and sustainable chemistry and gender. In November, at gender in the UN system and how it is being dealt with elsewhere. And in December, so to say for Christmas, we're looking at gender and the SAICM Beyond 2020 process that is going on right now. We want to avoid webinar overload, and that's why we created some quick and dirty sessions, each with a specific focus and 45 minutes, and maybe we're going 50 minutes and you're not going to kill us for that. Please note, though, that we are recording this session and we will make it available on our Gender and Chemicals website for you to watch later on or share with colleagues. Our next slide shows the agenda for today. We'll start with a presentation, Why Gender Justice is the Right Chemistry, by Anna Holthaus, our project coordinator. And then we have two distinguished guests, Nalini Sharma, the head of the SAICM Secretariat, and Jutta, the head of Division on International Chemicals from the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. We will hear the presentation and the two statements from the guest speakers first, and then hopefully have a bit of time for questions and answers. But if it might be short, rest assured, there will be more opportunity throughout the series of webinars to discuss some issues in more detail. If you do have a technical problem, let us know in the chat. We'll try and watch that and try and help you with that. And again, if you can keep your video on, it's nice to build a bit of community here and see each other. If your connection is bad, you might want to switch it off. Before we start with Anna's presentation, an introduction and overview on the issues, we'd like to do a brief poll, and that's a first for us. So let's see, we've prepared two questions for you to get a bit of a feel who's here. Anna? Do we have the poll? The first question?
And I can start with it. And you then will see the question at your screen.
So the question is, which stakeholder group do you belong to? Are you an intergovernmental organization, a government, NGO, industry, science, or other? And I believe you just have to click. Okay, you go ahead and click and we see who's here. If we have a good mix. It's not working for you, we know your government, Jutta.
Okay.
Okay, we have one more government. We have a lot of NGOs, we have a lot of intergovernmental organizations. We haven't gotten industry yet, so it might be a sport for next time to find some more industry people to join. Okay, there's some others. Science, it's a good mix. Is that everybody? I think, no, there's a few more votes coming in. Okay. As it is not working for Jutta and myself, I think we're about done, are we? Yeah, I think so. We might want to go to the experts. So we have quite a few intergovernmental organizations. You're actually leading the pack. And then there's government and other NGOs and science. And next time, we'll try and have some industry representatives as well. Okay? Okay. Anna, you agreed to go to the next?
Yeah, you just have to.
Oh, you just scroll down and it's already done. Good, you people are fast. Okay, so gender isn't new to most of you. It's interesting, you want to learn more about it and you're very familiar with it, working with it. So those two groups are the largest. So that's great. We have a lot of experts here already. And we'll try and find out who that one person was who admitted that they don't know so much about it. Thank you so much for making the poll. Thanks very much. I think I can end it, yeah, and share the results. Thanks very much, Anna. With that, I'd like to pass to Anna Holthaus. She's actually a political scientist, but she also studied gender issues, gender studies, and governance for sustainability. She's been our project coordinator for gender and chemicals for the past 2 years, and she will give you an introductory overview presentation about the relevant issues. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mino, and welcome also from my side. I want to show you briefly today why we believe that gender justice is the right chemistry, why gender in chemicals is an issue to pay more attention to. Even though especially NGOs and women activists have addressed issues of chemical safety for many years or even decades, still there's a lot of data missing and the research gaps on the interlinkages of gender and chemicals are huge. And that's why I won't show you the ideal process, how to deal with gender and chemicals today. Instead, I want to show you how interesting the interlinkages of gender and chemicals are. My presentation has 5 parts. I will start with what is gender, then I will look at gender aspects of chemical exposure, at gender analysis, at gender in different chemical sectors, and finally at gender in SAICM. So the first question is, what is gender? And not all of you, not all of you have indicated in the beginning that you know everything about the concept and thinking. So it might be good to clarify some terms. People tend to use the terms sex and gender interchangeably. However, while connected, the two terms are not equivalent. Sex is a person's biological gender based on genitals, but a person's gender is the complex interrelationship between 3 dimensions: body, identity, and social gender. So all in all, it's an interplay of biological and social factors. And gender is not naturally given, but rather determined by the social, cultural, and economic organization of a society and its norms and values. And thus, it is changeable, and data shows that today's young people have very different understandings of gender than previous generations. The term gender is often used as an umbrella term, which includes the entire field of gender and gender relation. And that's why this field is complex and multidimensional. And the gender studies, as well as understandings of gender, continually evolve. Gender equality is at first a human rights issue and a huge issue of political participation, because women are still underrepresented at all levels of political leadership. But gender equality is also a precondition and an indicator for sustainable development, which means that there is no sustainable development without gender equality. And that is why gender equality is an independent goal, SDG 5, in the Agenda 2030, and it is also integrated as a cross-cutting issue in other SDGs. And the term gender equality refers to the equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women and men, and implies that the interests, needs, and priorities of both are taken into consideration. The preferred terminology within the United Nations is indeed gender equality, rather than the very similar term gender equity. And last, the strategy for promoting gender equality is gender mainstreaming. And since 1919, there has been a growing debate about gender mainstreaming strategies in the United Nations. Gender mainstreaming was then endorsed in the Beijing Platform for Action and agreed at the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in 1995, and that's now 25 years ago. Gender mainstreaming was then defined in the ECOSOC Agreed Conclusion, 1997, as a strategy for making women's as well as men's concerns and experience an integral dimension of policies and programs in all political, economic, and societal spheres, so that women and men benefit equally. And this is already being done in several United Nations processes and conventions, like the International Climate Change and Biodiversity Conferences, and the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. And it's mostly done by establishing a gender focal point and developing gender action plans. But why gender and chemicals? Let's first have a look at gender aspects of chemical exposure. I'm sure most of you have already heard that women's and men's bodies are affected differently by certain chemicals. And reasons for that are, on the one hand, the different body composition and hormone levels, and on the other hand, that women live through other phases in life than men, such as pregnancy, breastfeeding, and menopause. And during these phases, their bodies become more susceptible to health damages from chemicals. Furthermore, chemical exposure can also be passed to the next generation through the placenta, as well as during breastfeeding, and this makes it a huge question of environmental justice. However, these biological differences have so far not been sufficiently researched and received too little attention in toxicology and risk assessments of chemicals. On the other hand, chemical exposure is influenced by various social gender aspects. Due to the division of labor, men and women are affected by different chemicals. For example, men are more likely to work in the construction sector and thus come into contact with chemicals from building materials. And women are more likely to work in the care sector with cleaning or care products. Additionally, the division of labor also causes differences in exposure within individual sectors. For example, men are more often directly exposed because they more often perform risky tasks. Women are also more affected by indoor pollution than men because they more often do unpaid care work at home. For example, they are polluted by chemicals in furniture, which is especially the case in poor population groups. And finally, due to gender roles, women and men tend to use different products. So what can we do? There is a powerful tool called gender analysis. And gender analysis enables us to understand and unpack root causes of unsustainable behavior and helps us to find new solutions for sustainable chemicals policies by thinking outside the masculine box, so to say, with a German perspective. And gender analysis can be used, for example, to find out why protective measures are disregarded when dealing with toxic chemicals. Women are less likely to be able to afford appropriately fitting personal protective equipment, in short PPE, than their male colleagues because it is more expensive and often even not available in the market. Men, on the other hand, often believe that wearing protective clothing is unnecessary and indicates a level of weakness, and they tend to use risky behavior and dangerous practices in order to improve their status in the group. So solutions might be extra money for women to buy fitting PPE and special safety training sessions for men to reflect on risky behavior. In our webinar 3 on gender and chemicals in practice at the end of September, we will hear more about the integration of the gender perspective in projects and discuss its potential and weaknesses. So let's now turn to gender and chemicals in different sectors. Chemicals are everywhere, and that's why interconnections to gender can be found in numerous sectors. These interconnections are complex and multidimensional, and I will just show you some examples now. for example, in the medicine or pharma sector. According to the WHO, being a woman or a man has a significant impact on health, but this is still often ignored. Studies mostly use the male body as the prototype, and that's why there's a huge lack of gender disaggregated data in medicine, including in human toxicology. Women and men often receive the same medical treatment because there is no research regarding gender differences. And this is the reason, for example, that medical side effects are stronger and more frequent for women. However, in recent years, the new field of gender medicine has been growing, and I very much recommend you Google it. You will find extremely interesting information. The cosmetic sector, on the other hand, is strongly characterized by the gender differences in consumer behavior due to female and male gender roles in society. For example, women spend more than twice as much for cosmetics as compared to men. And there's a lot of gender marketing in the cosmetic market, even regarding chemical substances in cosmetic products. For example, organic substances are more often used for women's products, and stronger chemical substances are used more frequently or in higher concentration in products for men. In addition, the cosmetic typical workplace, and in the global north, especially women with a migrant background are working in the cosmetic industry. It is a low-paid work and associated with various health risks due to the use of many chemicals. So in the agricultural sector, we can division labor, for example, in pesticides use. Women are more affected by indirect exposure from harvesting and handling chemically treated plants, while men are more often directly exposed when mixing and spraying the pesticides. There are also some areas of agriculture with a mostly female workforce, like the flower production, because there is a societal belief that women can handle flowers better because they need tender care, and women show more tenderness in their behavior. Often women also have to care for their children and breastfeed while working in the fields, and that's why women often bring them to work, and babies and children are then exposed to pesticides. And very importantly, women in many countries have traditionally been responsible for agriculture, and that's why they have a lot of knowledge on non-chemical alternatives and should be regarded as agents of change also in this regard. As a final example, let me mention the science and chemical industry sector. In the chemical science and industry, the proportion of women is still small, and looking at university programs in chemistry, gender issues are hardly ever considered. And even in the concept and our discussions on green and sustainable chemistry, the issue of gender equality is mostly overlooked. So this has to change, and more attention on gender is needed in nearly every sector. That's why we will speak about it more in detail at our next webinar in August, together with guest speakers from the ILO and Healthcare Well and Harm. And additionally, we want to discuss the conceptual integration of gender equality in green and sustainable chemistry at our 4th webinar at the end of October. So finally, let's have a look at gender and the strategic approach for international chemicals management, SAICM. SAICM text and resolutions mention that women's participation is lacking and their role has to be strengthened, as well as that women are more vulnerable to chemicals. But the term gender is not used. And according to the independent evaluation, gender was just addressed in a small minority of projects in the Quick Start program, and then this was mostly done by NGOs. Additionally, the recent report by the Special Rapporteur from 2019 recommends that greater attention to the gendered impact of exposure to toxic substances is needed in the future. And that is why in the SAICM 2020 process, several information documents on gender were produced and submitted. In 2017, IPEN submitted a paper on women in chemical safety at IP1. A paper on gender was presented at IP2 by the SAICM Secretariat, as well as a policy brief, and maybe Nalini will say a little bit more about that. And several organizations of the Women and Gender at SAICM mailing list submitted a position paper on gender at IPP last year. So now I will conclude my presentation by highlighting some suggestions that are based on what I discussed earlier. SAICM Beyond 2020 needs to generate more sex disaggregated data and research on gender. It should make gender analysis tools available and ensure their application. A gender focal point should be created and a gender action plan should be developed, and the full inclusion of women in decision-making has to be ensured. And to be able to implement this, it is absolutely necessary to include gender in the outcome documents of SAICM. So I hope you got a first insight on the interconnections of gender and chemicals and why we believe that gender just is the right chemistry. We will publish this presentation on our website, and there you will also find a list of references and further information. Thank you very much, and I pass back to Mino.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think we can give you a round of applause, even if you can't hear it, you can see it, because it's difficult on Zoom to hear everybody at the same time. Thank you very much, Anna, for this quite condensed overview, but different flashlights and into different issues that will be of further interest. We'll turn to our distinguished guest speakers for 2 statements. And I'm very pleased to welcome Nalini Sharma first. And I start with you, Nalini. Allow me to introduce you a little bit. Nalini Sharma has over 15 years of experience in addressing environmental issues at global, regional, and national levels, including in the field of sustainable development, most recently with the SAICM Secretariat as the new principal coordinator. Nalini joined the UNEP Chemicals and Health branch in 2015 and was leading the special program on institutional strengthening for chemicals and waste management from its inception. Nalini, we're very happy that you were able to join us today. We know you have a very full schedule with bureau meetings and other things going on. Nalini, you have the floor. May I unmute you?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. You go.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Minu and Anna, Jutta, colleagues. I ran through the list of participants who joined, and I saw a very old name that I had come across many years ago. Wonderful to see all of you. Thank you for having me. I had prepared some notes and providing context, and I think Anna really walked us through quickly through a lot of the areas that I was going to touch upon. Definitely, we know that chemicals are in everything we touch. Chemicals are essential for sustainable development in the future, and yet, while chemical exposure can pose a risk to all, it has been shown to affect men and women differently. Due to the physiological and socioeconomic differences between them. So the varied roles of women and men in society shape their exposure to chemicals, as Anna had also alluded to, and therefore gender dimensions of the sound management of chemicals and waste are highly relevant. And I'm glad we're having this series of webinars, I think, in the run-up to SAICM 5 to really provide that information, highlight the importance of this issue. With the size of the global chemical industry projected to double by 2030, there's growing concern for people working in chemically intensive sectors, such as agriculture, construction, electronics, and textiles. And women are also increasingly working in the informal sector and rarely receive basic training about the chemicals they use, which increases their vulnerability to health-related risks. So now more than ever, it is vital that measures are taken to ensure the needs of these advantaged groups are met when it comes to the sound management of chemicals and waste. Gender mainstreaming across high priority development areas provides benefits for both women and men through the creation of strategic opportunities and improved focus of operations. So identifying these strategic opportunities such as securing and the safe working conditions and promotion of these secure, safe working conditions can yield tangible results. The SDGs and the 2030 Agenda aim to address inequalities among all population groups, especially women, children, and the impoverished. And particularly SDG 5, which Anna alluded to, aims to achieve gender equality and improve women's rights. So directly addressing the links between the environment and gender in the context of SDGs will provide new opportunities to achieve these goals in a more sustainable and beneficial manner. UN Environment Programme and the International POPs Elimination Network, IPEN, are working in partnership on gender and chemicals, on raising awareness, promoting women's engagement and leadership in decision-making processes, as well as contributing to activities such as and related to the SAICM emerging policy issues and the SDGs. Gender considerations have been increasingly incorporated into global multilateral environment agreements, as Anna had mentioned, including the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and the Minamata Convention on Mercury. In general, all the SAICM emerging policy issues and other issues of concern have I never can say this word, but they have high exposure considerations related to gender. So, for example, exposure to high levels of heavy metals in life cycle of electronics, where women are the primary source of labor in Latin America and Asia. A gender review across the current emerging policy issues and other issues of concern has been initiated as part of an ongoing SAICM GEF project on global best practices on SAICM emerging policy issues. The project has established 4 communities of practice, and one of them being on chemicals and SDGs. And the first discussion that will take place towards the end of August, I think on the 26th of August, will be focused on gender and sound management of chemicals and waste. And we encourage all the participants here to connect to this to the communities of practice, and further information will be disseminated. In terms of the legislation, effective information systems, as well as scientific evidence and knowledge for chemicals, is very much the core SAICM community efforts on the emerging policy issues, and remain relevant in the future to protect human health and the environment from the harmful effects of chemicals across the life cycle. So there's additional opportunities in strengthening focus of developing, collecting, and analyzing gender disaggregated data, indicators, other information to support decision-making. And I really appreciate also that last slide that Anna had provided us, that gives us some impetus to continue to work towards that vision, to ensure that gender is mainstreamed into SAICM beyond 2020. As you may know, the 5th session of the International Conference on Chemicals Management, ICCM 5, has been rescheduled for the 5th to the 9th of July 2021 in Bonn. Important decisions on the framework of chemicals and waste beyond 2020 are expected to be taken at this juncture. And we call on all stakeholders who have the opportunity to tap into the potential to address gender issues, to promote equality, and to protect disadvantaged populations in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to really engage, provide inputs, to be at the forefront in terms of this discussion. So I'll end my little speech there. Thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you very much, Nalini. Let's give her, we can also give her a silent round of applause like this. Thanks very much, Nalini, for some insights also from the heart of the SAICM process. But I also really appreciated that you highlighted the opportunities that are included in including gender, strategic opportunities that come from including gender, for example, like creating safe working opportunities, and of course achieving the SDGs with that angle and that push. So thank you very much for your statement. And I'd like to turn to Jutta Emig, our next guest speaker. She's also very much at the heart of the SAICM Beyond 2020 process. Jutta Emig has a PhD in food chemistry and has been with the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety since 1992, a crucial year. From 2002 to 2005, Jutta was heading the ministry's team tasked with the implementation of gender mainstreaming in environment policies and strategies. And since 2014, she's been the head of the Division on International Chemical Safety and Sustainable Chemistry, which is responsible for the German contribution to the international conventions regarding chemical safety, Minamata, Rotterdam, and Stockholm, as well as for contributing to SAICM. In addition, the division promotes the development and implementation of sustainable chemistry on a national and international basis. Jutta, we're very happy to have you today, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Minu. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to say hello to all colleagues and friends of the Gender and Chemicals family. And I want to thank Minu and Anna for the invitation, not just for the invitation to this webinar, but also for the initiative to launch this webinar series. I think this is really a very good idea and needed in order to prepare well for ICCM 5. I want also to note that next time I'm going to speak in the beginning, so I don't have to change many of the prepared ideas I have collected, and therefore please forgive me if my English is not always perfect. I try not to duplicate what has been said by Anna in her very good presentation or by Nalini. I would like to come back to the presentation of Anna. One slide I found especially interesting. It is showing a family in the kitchen. The wife is obviously cleaning something. The man is taking the waste outside. And from several polls in Germany, we have learned that disposing the waste, at least in Germany, maybe in industrialized countries, seems to be seen by many men as their fair contribution to the burden sharing of caring work at home. On the other hand, there's another interesting issue about garbage collectors. Only recently, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, the fight of women for jobs as garbage collectors in Germany got to the headlines of important newspapers and magazines. At this time, obviously, the public opinion was, and the intention of the public was to protect or prevent women from getting these kinds of jobs. Just as an observation, to underline that it's not only about the biological issues that we need to talk, it's also about the social roles and the burden sharing. And this makes, of course, the issue of gender mainstreaming more complicated. My initial experiences with gender mainstreaming, as already been mentioned by Minu, date back to 2003, when I was in charge of developing the gender mainstreaming strategy in Germany, and to develop proposals how to implement this into environment policies and strategies. In 2004, I participated, as probably some of you as well, in an important conference in Nairobi called Women as the Voice of the Environment, trying to address the 3 strategic objectives of the Beijing platform referring to environment. The first is involve women actively in environmental decision making. The second, integrate gender concerns perspectives in policies and programs for sustainable development. The third, strengthen and establish mechanisms at the national, regional, and international levels to assess the impact of development and environmental policies on women. I want to share 2 observations I made when flipping through the documents, in particular the reports of this famous conference that are still available in the internet. Firstly, I noticed that the need to reduce risks caused by hazardous chemicals was mentioned already at that time, not as prominent as climate change or desertification. This, of course, may not be a surprise. Until now, lack of awareness for the relevance of the issues we are dealing with as the chemicals and waste family. On the other hand, as was already mentioned by Anna and Minu, the presence of chemicals and products containing chemicals in our daily life is so overwhelming that there is a need to really raise the political awareness for this relevance of the sound management of chemicals, as well as for the linkages to the gender mainstreaming. And I think this is the point why I come back to the presentation and the series of webinars or workshops that are going to take place. I believe then, coming back to the three main tasks given by the Beijing platform, it is quite easy to just evaluate the degree of implementation of the first objective. It's just about counting the heads of women and men that are involved in decision making. However, in my opinion, this is not ensuring in itself that gender concerns and perspectives are taken into account when decision making. And especially gender concerns and perspectives relating to chemicals and waste. I think this goes far beyond the impact, as I already said, that chemicals have on women and men due to their biological differences. To get chemistry right, or to get the sound management of chemicals and waste right, requests to also take into account the different societal roles of women and men. And referring to the aforementioned example of the garbage collectors, this implies that policies on chemicals and waste must be designed to ensure that the risks due to the exposure of chemicals are minimized, while at the same time avoiding that men and women are discriminated due to their respective roles. To get chemistry right, the gender impact assessment developed by the Federal Environment Ministry years ago could facilitate the necessary processes of analyzing and balancing the different aspects of decision making. However, given the complexity, we need to get the best possible expertise on gender aspects as well as on chemicals production and uses. I want to thank you, Mino and Anna, for setting up the series of workshops on different topics related to chemicals. ICCM 5 in July 2021 offers a unique opportunity to contribute to the development of the framework on chemicals and waste beyond 2020. We can only get it right if needs and perspectives of women and men are taken into account equally. Therefore, let's use the series of workshops to strengthen our expertise and to ensure that women as the voice for the environment are heard at ICCM 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jutta. Thank you, thanks. Also for the call or pointing to the challenge of needing to raise political awareness, also mentioning a tool that is actually around the gender impact assessment for environmental policy that you were part of developing, and both of you again for looking ahead to ICCM 5. That was a strong statement that ICCM 5 will pay attention to these issues. I would say it won't be successful if it doesn't, and we'll all try and make sure that it does. We have a few more minutes, and I'd like to invite our participants to pose a question either to one or all of the three presenters. Best would be to use the chat because there's 60 of you, and it will be difficult if we do it via the microphones. And while you do that, if you come up with a two-pointed question, that would be very welcome. While you do that, let me just point out that the recording of this webinar, along with the presentation that Anna made and the references that are now being collected in the chat and some other background material will be made available on the gender-chemicals.org website that we're running so that you can access all of this. But I hope I didn't discourage you by saying you're so many and we only have a few minutes. I'd say let's see if we have a question or a comment from somebody who would like to do that using the chat here. Don't be shy. Now, I suppose they're thinking hard. If any of the three speakers would like to comment on something that the others have said, please go ahead and do so. You can just speak freely, the three of you, and I'm just looking here. It seems that we've been very informative. See if there's a question. There's a question from Romy Shapira, who's, I think, based in Tel Aviv. Thanks so much for a fascinating presentation. Many roles and trends of women and men were stated, but is there hard data that we may be able to see? Thank you, Romy, for the question. Where could people find hard data? Can you give them any hints, references? Is there things that we can share? I'm looking at Anna, Nalini, and Jutta, and you should unmute yourselves if you want to make a comment. Hard data? Okay. And the second question, I'm sorry, Anna, the second question that I'm going to take is from Andrea around priorities. What would be the first thing to do? And then we maybe have to close. So, hard data. Anna, you wanted to comment.
So on hard data, I have prepared a list of references for you, and I will send you the list around after this webinar. There's, for example, a brochure from UNDP about gender and chemicals with a lot of hard data on biological differences, for example. Also, you can find something on the SAICM website on gender and the strategic approach for international chemicals management, and there you can see the interrelation of gender, biological differences, and the emerging policy issues, yeah, very in detail. So I think when you have a look at our reference list, then you will find a lot of hard data.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'm wondering if we could use a last round to address both questions, if you wish. And I would start maybe with Jutta. You wanted to speak first in the beginning, and then with Nalini, and then with Anna. And the question is around hard data. And the second question is from Andrea around, okay, if this is all important, if you had to prioritize, what is it that should be done first in relation to chemicals and gender? Jutta.
I probably start with the easier part. This is hard data. I really think hard data is an important question, and thanks to you and Anna, we've now at least a list, but certainly contributions from whoever is attending our webinar today or in future on hard data, whoever finds something or data on this, I think it would be very welcomed, and a collection of those data would then also help us to integrate this knowledge from the data into policy making.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Jutta. Maybe I can just extend that call. So if there are things that people can share and you want it included in what we're sending around or what we're putting on the website, please let us know. Nalini, I'm turning to you. I need to unmute.
Okay, yep. There we go. So thank you so much for those questions. I think actually I would bring them both together because, you know, often we don't have enough data and information or disaggregated data for us to make informed decisions. And so perhaps, you know, as actually was in one of Anna's slides for what ICCM 5 or SAICM Beyond 2020 could focus on, and maybe that would be our priority, just to have kind of a one-stop shop on issues and data and information regarding chemicals and gender issues. So I hope, yeah, and this could be an area where when we have the webinar that's going to be hosted under the GEF, not the webinar, sorry, the Communities of Practice that's going to be hosted on the GEF project, could look at in a little bit more detail. I think it'd be interesting to see that and how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, thank you very much, Nalini, for these suggestions. Thanks. And I turn to you, Anna. I think you're actually getting the last word.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say on Andrea's question, I think the most important or the most motivating step is to create a gender focal point in the gender action plan. This is mostly done in other UN processes, and we can learn a lot from other UN conventions. To Yaya's comment, I think he is already absolutely right. We need more ideas and approaches how to integrate gender in practice, in programs and projects. And we have to work on that, and that's extremely important, of course. On the other hand, I think we, of course, have to integrate gender in the SAICM documents. And yeah, so let's do this. I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar. I hope you enjoyed it, and that you are looking for our second one. If you are already active in the SAICM process and you are now interested in doing more advocacy work for gender equality, I very much invite you to join our Women and Gender at SAICM mailing list. Just go to our homepage, there you will find our email address, send an email to us, and I will add you to the list. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm just watching the chat as well. Thanks very much, people, for sharing the resources on the communities of practice. And from Olga, the webinar that Hey Support conducted, which is also recorded and available. And then I'll put the internet address again. I'd like to particularly thank our guest speakers, Nalini, Sharma, and Jutta, Emig, and Anna. Well done. And hope to see you again in about 4 weeks' time when we talk about gender and chemicals in different sectors. So hope to see you soon. And thank you very much for being here. Thanks.